The battle right now is about the framing of the economy. What is it? What does it mean? And what does it mean to voters? And the two campaigns are at sort of two different points of the spectrum on that. On the one hand, you have Trump and his campaign wanting to talk about inflation, wanting to talk about throw the bums out because of inflation, a very simple kind of contrast. And you have the Harris campaign trying to look forward, trying to talk about future economic opportunities for all Americans. And this is the dispute today. The campaign, in my mind, that wins this framing debate, wins this framing dispute, will take the White House.
You have some really interesting numbers here, and it almost has to do with the way that you're asking the question about the economy. We can get really specific about inflation, for instance, or we can just talk about your financial well-being. You've asked a couple of questions here, Cliff, and I'd love for you to walk us through this. When looking at things you want in the next president, let's be specific about the way you're asking in your poll. Which of the following is most important to you? Building an economy that gives every American a chance to succeed. 21% chose that number one issue here, and it's D plus 23 in the margin favoring Kamala Harris. When you ask the question, which of the following is most important to you, and in the case of inflation here, getting costs and inflation under control comes in at 17%, but that's advantage Donald Trump, plus 33. How do you rationalize those two?
Yeah, two things can exist in people's head at any one given time, but this goes back to my initial point. The campaign, the election will be decided upon who best frames the issue of the economy. Mm-hmm. As we can see, the number one issue today for Americans is the economy writ large. If it's framed on the Harris side, that you're looking towards the future, looking for a greater opportunity for all Americans, she will take the election. If Donald Trump is successful and he puts it in terms of change election where inflation has really affected negatively Americans, he will take it. And the data just reinforces that overall point.
So with the advantage that we've seen sort of turning to Kamala Harris on this issue, either closing the gap, catching up with, or in some cases topping Donald Trump within the margin of error, specifically on the issue of the economy then, suggests that she's doing a better job framing this issue. That is your point when it comes to messaging to voters.
Yeah, I would say today the Harris campaign is much more effective at framing the issue of the economy than the Trump campaign is. Now, obviously, we have some time to go, but at this point right now, the Harris campaign is much more effective. And I would just add to that point, it was because of the sequence of events, the assassination attempt, the historically bad debate, Biden stepping out, that gave a moment for voters to reflect, to pause, and to think about who they're going to vote for. And Harris and her campaign were much more effective at filling that vacuum.
Okay, so talk to us about the debate tomorrow night then. We've got the running mates. Granted, they probably will not have the boffo ratings that we saw the presidential candidates at 67 million viewers, but they're going to have a real opportunity here to talk to a lot of Americans. And I suspect that it'll involve more than being weird and eating house pets. When it comes to policy, when it comes to the economy, do either of the running mates have an opportunity to make a dent?
Yeah, I would say perhaps on the margins, typically not. But I often look at debates as a metaphor for the relative efficacy of each campaign. I'll be looking for who is more on message, who is more able to hammer home the economy issue, who is more able to frame to their advantage the issue of the economy as laid out in our conversation here. Mm-hmm. So I'll be looking for those things specifically. Whether that has an impact on the actual polls themselves, probably not. But it will say a lot about the relative efficiency, again, of each campaign.
What do you make of this opportunity, if I can call it that, and I'm not trying to sound cold. It's an opportunity to succeed or fail if you're a presidential candidate dealing with a major natural disaster like we have right now in the Southeast. Donald Trump's making a beeline to Georgia. He's criticizing Kamala Harris for not doing the same. But if you don't do this right, of course, it can be a detriment to your campaign. And I wonder, to the extent that it implies competency for the candidate, how important this is.
Yeah, this goes directly to whether a candidate looks and acts presidential. So both Harris as well as Trump have to behave as such. There's really more downside than upside when it comes to a hurricane. Indeed, Americans, people understand that a hurricane is an act of God. No one individual, government or otherwise, can stop it. It's about how you react to it. And that's what Americans will be looking for in their two possible presidential candidates.
As we spend time with Cliff Young from Ipsos, let's get to it now. I'm scrolling through this very impressive deck of research that you've given us, our bespoke deck from Cliff. And as you get down to one of the final slides here, there is the headline, "The Day After in a Mushroom Cloud." Cliff, how worried are we about accepting the results of this election, the noise and the confusion that's going to follow? And I ask you that knowing that based on history, we'll probably see Donald Trump declare victory early in the night.
Yeah, that's a great point. And obviously, this is something at Ipsos we're worried about, and I think the market in general is. And the public opinion polling is pretty clear on the issue. For the most part, across political lines, Americans are willing to accept the results. Super majority support, high 70s, low 80s, independent of political stripe, as I said. However, Republicans are much more likely to believe that the results weren't fair. And that's sort of the tale of our world today, that we have a very divided America. Two sides of the fence see the issue as completely different. But at the very least, a supermajority of Americans would accept, or at least they say they would accept, the results of the election.
I'll tell you what, if it ends up being that Saturday, for instance, like it was 4 years ago, just in our remaining moment, Cliff, how worried are you that people have short memories, that might not remember that counting mail-in absentee ballots takes a long time, that some states might take days to settle?
Yeah, the counting and the time it takes to count really undermines the credibility. Indeed, America is an outlier compared to other democracies in the world that have those counts done the same day. And so if this draws out too much, and indeed it's going to be a very close election in my mind, and it probably will, that doesn't help the credibility of the outcome. That only can hurt it.